Shirley.
Here.
And Craig. Here. Okay, go ahead.
One part-time rescue. Sean, you,
Yeah, sorry, it's me. That was about 5 minutes. Hello.
Hi, Sean.
That's city business, it has nothing to do with Sean. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead. You're proposing for
raises or something?
basis for your,
Do you want to see what you're talking about?
Oh yeah, so I was never told about this until they saw it the other day. Oh yeah. But Ash and I did have a meeting, so.
Okay.
So yeah, we're just discussing raising wages for paramedics $1 and then EMTs 50 cents is the proposal for that. Just across the
that's
board.
his recommendation for his department. If the council is okay with that, we need a motion.
I assume that's okay, budget wise?
Yes.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by
Second.
Morgan. Did you second Mike? Second by Kavah. How do you vote? Dolly? Patrick?
No.
Morgan?
Yes.
Renslow?
Yes.
Kavah?
Yes.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay.
Okay, 2, city and utility financial, Chip?
That's your meeting. That's
Yeah.
yours.
All right, good evening. The material that's in front of you is reviews. A little bit of the background. So the water utility is looking at two water projects, the water tower, which has been bid, and then a water main project that's going to be bid on June 2nd with proposed utility board approval on June 9th. So I'll just highlight a few items on this, in this material. First couple pages are on user rate increases. So the page numbers are at the bottom right. Page 4 of 16, the mayor had asked for a comparison to Greenfield water rates. I don't, if you can give me a sense how, if you want to go over this in detail or just, I can reference it, you can refer to it later. So that's what this compares. The top is Stuart's current, well, close to the recently approved rates at tonight's utility board meeting. Compares that to Greenfield at the bottom. And then on the right side are what sample bills are for given customer amounts or usage levels. Greenfield has a different base charge for commercial and residential customers, so just point that out.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure I'm reading this right.
Page 4?
4, right? So. Because we've tiered them. Okay, never mind.
They've got a flat per 1,000 gallon charge, which is what some folks are going more toward than it's all just uniform, but that's how what they have. So, the next, let's skip over the next couple pages. That's more utility board information. At the board meeting. If you would, please, go to page 8 of 16, please. And we talked about user rates at the utility board meeting, but we didn't get into this page. What this material is, it reflects, so the utility board is planning an interim financing right now that's proposed to close in June this year. That interim financing will be taken out or paid off by what's called long-term USDA completion bonds. Those long-term USDA completion bonds, you're locked in at a rate of 1.5%, which is phenomenal. That rate will reset on July 1st. It's expected to go to 4% or something close to that level. So you're in incredibly good shape as a utility having a rate of 1.5%. So what this page reviews is we're looking at the interim financing that'll close in June. What this page reviews is alternative debt payment structures on the long-term USDA debt. So scenario A is a 25-year payment structure, assuming we're paying off an interim financing of $6.7 million. The amount will be determined once we get construction bids on the water main project. Scenario B beginning in column F, assumes a 30-year level debt structure. You'll note that at the very bottom of the page, that scenario has interest cost of $1,636,000. Scenario A has interest cost, the shorter payment structure of $1,348,000. So scenario B is roughly $287,000 higher, given the longer debt term. Scenario C reflects a 35-year payment structure. Keep in mind, we can go out to 40 years. I think there's a strong desire to keep it shorter, so that's why we're focusing on the shorter payment structures. Has a debt service at $248,000 on a 35-year structure versus scenario A, that interest cost at the very bottom of column J is roughly $581,600 higher. An interesting scenario, I think, is scenario D, and that assumes you would begin or start with a 30-year payment structure, in other words, scenario B, and that you would, so those payments in the non-gray shaded years in scenario D are roughly $280,000, similar to scenario B. And then it assumes in 3 out of 5 years, in the gray shaded rows, that you make extra payments that are roughly $323,400 per year, which is approximately similar, just slightly less than scenario A. So that you take out a 30-year amortization, but with this approach, you pay it back with those extra payments over 27 years. So just comparing that to scenario A, the 25-year straight level structure, that's higher in interest costs by roughly $115,000, which is per year. Over the 27 years, it's about $4,200 per year. And then this, I think this is the real zinger. If we did fall and had a 25-year level debt scenario B with the red font at 4%, if that is what the rate resets to on July 1st, that interest cost would be at the very bottom, $3,938,000, which is $2,589,000, $2,006,000, let's call it, higher than scenario A. So it shows that really the incredible advantage that we get from that 1.5% interest rate, despite all the, the process that we've been through with USDA. So this is kind of where we're at for a starting point. I know, we're planning the interim financing now. The question on the agenda relates to how do you pay for the long-term debt? And I know Brian has asked several questions about the ability of paying that debt from TIF, from taxing financing dollars. So this page kind of uses a starting point, and I assume, just to keep it simple, scenario A for the comparison scenarios, the 25-year level debt structure. So the next page, page 9 of 16, what this page reviews, it's a repeat at the far left side of the table, the payment structure in 25 years, principal and interest, and then takes different alternative approaches in terms of the amount paid from TIF in columns G, H, and I. If you pay 50% of the debt service from TIF, that's roughly $161,975 per year. Percent is $242,000, and then 100% is, of course, the full amount of $323,900. I know there are some strong opinions on how you approach this, and I really don't want to get in the middle of that, but I'm afraid that that's where we're at. So I'll say this is going to have to be a policy decision that the board and the city council have to make. It's the board's project, the utilities project. So it seems kind of in the flow, the order of things, it would start with the utility board. Do you want to proceed with a TIF request from the city in terms of paying some of the debt from TIF?
But if the council doesn't want to,
If the council isn't open to it, then it's a debt issue then.
Yeah. just so we're understanding the math correctly, if we paid 50% of this with TIF, on page 8, under column E, our total payback is $8,098,000, correct? Clear out the
That's
bottom.
repeated on page,
Okay, so on page 9, so
column E in page 9.
column E on page 9 compared to column M as in Mary on page 9, paid for by TIF, so the net savings is $2 million, is that right?
So I'll give a little background, generally, the utility is a separate board. It would pay for its own debt from its own native enterprise fund. That's the most common approach. Some cities have used TIF to pay a portion of enterprise fund related projects. It's less common than paying it purely from a water revenue debt, though. That's just from my experience.
But doesn't our city have a larger proportion?
You have an inordinate amount of TIF dollars.
So we've got an excess of TIF dollars, which is able to be leveraged in this case if the city were willing to save the utilities and the water fund money. So if the
That would
city
be the
was,
framework.
so if the city was willing to do that, and we chose not to do that, we would be spending $2 million more over 25 years. Is that true?
If you narrowly look at it from the water fund.
Correct.
Yes.
We're paying half from the water fund, half from TIF, we would save $2 million over 25 years.
The items to consider though, if you do pay part of the water debt service from TIF, you're taking TIF dollars away from what would otherwise be used for city, or would be available to be used for city projects.
So
That's what I was wondering, Chip,
That's
if
what
we have Quick Star come in, which they're not asking for TIF, but have another Carl Moyer or other places, how much is available for other businesses coming in?
I got that. I'll get to it in a minute.
Okay.
It's laid out. So,
So that's the benefit to
I'll
us,
just-
is more of what the city wants to do.
Yeah.
If we, and it goes back to what you said.
right, question
Does
for
the
the council.
utility board even want to ask for that? I mean,
I guess to the board members, you need to understand where TIF is coming from here and what TIF really is. The limited amount I know tells me that what happens here is that when a TIF district is created, and the entire city of Stuart is a TIF district, that taxes are frozen at that point. And
The valuation.
the valuations are frozen. In the years after that, the valuations increase, comes back to the city. And the city is paid those dollars for city projects. Now, basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we use TIF, the city would have to approve that project every year, wouldn't they?
You would, and it would have to be an annual appropriation subject to the city council approval every year. Because the city can't take on that full amount because it would count against your legal debt limit.
The study I've done on TIF tells me that in the event you have no other method of financing, Chip has shown us several different ways that we can finance this legitimately through our USDA program, the entire project. And I'm not sure that I want to give up the autonomy that the utility board has had since the ratepayers in Stuart, 50, 60, your dad may have been on one of those initial boards too, Kim.
He was.
That said, we're tired, and forgive me, I'm not pointing fingers here, but we're tired of the city council spending all the revenue in the utility fund. So we're gonna take it away from you, and we're gonna create a municipal utility board as trustees for that revenue. And that's where we're at here today. Because we're gonna give up, if we use TIF on a project like this, we're gonna give up some of that autonomy to the city council. And I'm not sure that's what the last 50 or 60 years of ratepayers,
what are we giving up, I guess?
we're gonna give up, in the end, we're gonna give up authority to the city council.
all we're doing is making a water improvement, paying it through TIF, which is more efficient.
But
Financial
you're melding, we're a revenue-based program.
Right.
I mean,
I get
our
it,
dollars come from revenue,
I
yours
get
comes from taxes.
but it's,
So you're gonna take TIF and refer that, make it, that's gonna be a tax program for the city council. We're just gonna, at your discretion, at the city council discretion, we're gonna say, okay, it's okay for you to do that again another year. I want this to be,
but we just approved a bunch of payments that went from the utilities to the city because the utilities 15 years ago.
that's right,
agreed to pay.
and I'm not so sure we were real smart in doing that. And I was involved in one of them, and that's one of the regrets I have sitting on this utility
The
board.
only problem I see is council changes. Mike's got 2 more years, Christina has 2 more years unless they rerun. That could be a problem if you gotta do it every year and the next council says, well, we don't.
But
wanna
there's
do
never,
it.
in the history of the state of Iowa, there's never been a default on a TIF revenue bond, geo bond, and jump.
I mean, we could say we're not gonna pay our employees right now.
Yeah, I mean,
that
we
would
could
be done.
approve.
It just sounds like we got a little animosity going here when I heard a couple meetings going that we need to be united and stuff, and we're looking for a way to try to save a couple $1 million.
Where we can,
Nobody-
where we can
wait,
do that.
John, I wasn't.
Oh, no,
We don't wanna do that. That's what I'm hearing, we didn't even wanna vote, on getting some alternative bids, on the water project at all. You didn't even want, if that project comes in, you said you'd have to rebid it, and then you're gonna be downtime. It's just, I don't understand that kind of thinking, but that's.
Well, what I don't understand is why at the last minute, we come in, we've been working on this project for 3 years. And why all of a sudden at the last minute, are we coming in with an alternate financing program that is really gonna muddy up the water here, as far as I'm concerned? And maybe I'm too simple, but
I would just say you've got 2 frameworks to look at this through. You've got the basic framework of, we want the enterprise funds to be self-supporting and separate and support their own projects. And you have another framework that says you want to try to leverage it for the lowest cost dollar for the ratepayer or taxpayer.
And that's where I'm at,
So
without a question.
Yes.
you,
I don't believe
You as a
that.
board
I
and
think
council-
I see too much conspiracy. And I think there's a concerted effort here for the city council to come in and try to usurp as much authority they can on the utility board. That's
Boy,
where I'm at.
I
No,
kinda take
I don't want
offense
to hear
to
it,
that.
Mike. I don't want to hear
You
it.
gotta hear it, John,
All
that's
right, go
offensive.
ahead. Go ahead.
That's offensive. You think we're gonna come in here and take over? We're trying to help. You don't want our help? Fine. Go out there and tell your neighbors, you're gonna have to raise the rates, to pay for your project.
We just said we're not gonna raise
But
rates
you
very
will.
much.
You will.
Oh, eventually we will.
Yeah, see, that's what I hear up here from everybody on this
Water
board. Except for Brian, it's like, if we have to do it, by God, we're gonna do it, and we're just gonna eat it. And you're talking 1,800 people, we're just gonna do it. You don't wanna think of any other kind of
We have thought about it.
alternate way of doing things, that's all we're doing here,
My whole intention here, John, completely is to get the best bang for the taxpayer and the most efficient use. There's no conspiracy at all. It's very black and white.
Okay,
in matter.
it's black and white right here. And I guess, it seems to me that there's a lot of risk. From here, there's a lot of risk in us using a TIF program.
there is risk, for sure. So the most common risk that you'll see, and that's why I think it's through the analysis, we wanted to be sure that their water enterprise fund on its own could pay the debt. Because that's better plan to date. The risks are, there's proposals at the state legislative level every year to change something with DIF, either to your original Stuart urban renewal area has no sunset. There's proposals that would limit, they haven't passed, but they get proposed every year, that would limit that to 20 years. There's proposals that would eliminate the use of blight as part of the city's TIF dollars that would come in. There's proposals that would limit the type of projects that you use TIF for.
So
So
as
there's risk, I will really,
as This stands on its
Just-
own for 20
It
years.
stands on its
Okay,
own
so
from
as
the
a
water
backup, you
fund.
could say, okay, TIF changed, we saved the utility fund $81,000 a year, but it changed in year 5, so we have to go back to use the water fund fully, which we already know works in columns A through E on page 9.
And the water fund in your legal documents, should the water financing proceed, the only pledged revenue from a legal covenant standpoint is the water fund. And that won't change, because it's a water revenue debt.
Have you worked with any communities recently that have blended funds across entities like this?
Before you answer that, Chip, I'm really not concerned about what goes on in another community.
Okay,
It's apples and oranges, and I'm not really interested in hearing.
I asked him, I guess I'd like to hear from him.
The city of Huxley had used TIF to pay for part of a water plant project. Is
City
one-
of where?
Huxley,
Okay.
just south of Ames.
So that's, and do
It's,
they,
it's less common than. In the middle of this.
well, okay,
It's
well,
less
let's back
common
up.
than-
Let's go back to give a valid point. So in TIF, in the beginning of our public buildings, our Department of Justice issues that we had, this goes back a long time, okay? 15+ years. When we got a lawsuit filed for Department of Justice ADA noncompliance, we had to go through 9 to 10 buildings and make them ADA compliant. That's what led us to sharing costs at that point to make the buildings ADA compliant. We have not put water mains in for a long time, so that brings us to another milestone of a generation. And if we can save $2 million by doing that, funding it through the same source, I don't know why we wouldn't. And
But what's the real cost of that?
the real cost, he's already got it right here. It saves us $2 million.
Chip, I'm gonna put you on, I think that the use of TIF for the utility board is, for me, it's a non-starter. I think everybody realizes that. And the other part of TIF that a lot of people don't understand is that you, like I said before, you use TIF when there's absolutely no other way to finance it. And Chip has shown us several ways that we can legitimately finance this over a period of 25 to 30 years. And I guess I want to know what your opinion is, Chip. And I'm putting you on the spot, I know that.
So I'll point to, go to page, if you would, page 11 of 16. This reviews, and I'll answer it through this. I'll say it's not an easy question to answer. I'll say that
I'm sure
very
it's not.
clearly. But what this page lays out is the existing, it's existing and proposed debt obligations paid by TIF of the city. So in the left half of the side, it's existing debt issues only, which are subtotaled in column AN. And then there are proposed projects in column AO, AP, and AQ. So housing phase 4 is in column A. And assumed, and there's all kinds of holes that you can poke in this because we don't know the cost yet, but the assumed cost for White Pole Road, $2.2 million, part of which will be paid by Adair County Wind Turbine monies. That's included. And then, and assume, and it's noted in the header at the top, column AQ assumes that 50% of the water revenue debt is paid from TIF. And USDA debt has to be level, so I'm showing this as level in column AQ. The total existing and proposed in column AR. The available TIF revenues in column AS. Those years in yellow, where it's primarily it's existing debt that has higher payments. I'm really nervous about those years in terms of the available TIF and how skinny those years are. So if I can answer it that way, can you do it? Yes, it's possible. Does it limit the city's ability to fund other projects from TIF? Absolutely.
This factors in 8 million or 9 million that road project and 4A.
It factors in housing phase 4, the complete scope, which is estimated at a cost of $5.7 million in column AO. and noted in the top right header.
And so what are the main bonds that fall off in that 5 to 7 year period?
It's the first three housing phases. It's the debt for City Hall.
So that's
There's
what
a
creates
debt.
the surplus on the right of 1 million and 2 million as the years go on.
Right, the surplus develops as existing debt pays off.
So what percentage of TIF is available and what percentage of the TIF are we asking the city for over that 25-year period?
It's roughly about 11% of, so, and that's calculated by taking column A, Q, the 4 million amount, which is 50% of the debt. And I don't have a total here, but divided by the future years in column AT. So, and I start, for future years, I start in FY 23-24.
So we're asking for a larger proportion in the early years of those 25 years and a lot less in the later years. Is that fair?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
It does factor in, you do have, as if the council approved phase 4 at 5.7 million in that road, this,
In this room.
Right.
That's,
so that's
only
factoring in,
so
and then it
if
still
we,
shows.
if we did just, 4A out there, of course, that would be a lot less
Absolutely.
on that, right?
Yeah, like 3.5, I think it was,
Okay.
instead of 5.7.
And then depending on,
The road,
Yeah, I don't-
right.
Chip, I got a question. If the utility board declines the TIF tonight and goes forward, can revisit it next year and say, well, we want TIF, or is it done deal right now?
I think you can revisit it. I would say, if you tend to use TIF, I would get you would have to amend your urban renewal plan. I would get that done sometime this year, as the projects are in process. So I'll point out one other item. If you see the red font in columns A, O, and AP, those are to make these payments fit. We have the constraint of USDA debt having to be level to make those payments fit on the proposed projects for housing phase and Front Street. Those red font years are interest only. And that's the only way that this fits. And you have to have a positive TIF amount. It can't be negative, or otherwise you can't pay the debt. So this assumes you pay no principal on those two projects in those initial years where it's red font.
And you've accounted for like Casey's pending things that Ash had asked for. Is there any other things?
Casey's is included, assuming they come back and are compliant with the request of the city.
I think what Chip's
The body
trying,
shop is included if that, assuming that gets
He's trying to
approved
get,
in
this has
theory.
got a worst case scenario in it with all the things accounted for.
I just wonder, this is for the council, what he's trying to explain this for the council, that he's worried about the first 5 to 6 years. Will be in a limbo until 2029. Can it be done? Yes, but he's just kind of trying to explain that, look at it carefully, what he's highlighting with the yellow and the red as a council. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. He just wants you to be aware of the consequences.
and he's assuming the full price of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything, yeah.
That's,
Whether
it's
we
worst
do-
case.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
do
all your
100% of the housing projects.
Yes,
White Pole Road.
Right.
and that can
So-
change. That can change
Yeah.
if we go down with the housing project, we go down with the White Pole Road. But
That's
he's
looking at
giving you,
worst case.
yeah, he's giving you the worst case scenario as a council.
And Chip, could you also not adjust the payments, the portion paid by the water revenue? I know it has to be illustrative purposes. The 161 does not have to be the same each year, correct? So you could pay more from the water fund, less from TIF when those years are tight. So
In theory, I think you could.
you could take, you can make 100% of the payment from the water fund in the beginning and 0 and TIF at 100% on the end of it.
So, yeah. Not for Matt's purpose, if you have any other business that is asking for making a TIF request of the city council, this includes nothing for anything new or unknown.
This is very
So
much what
that's-
I want the council.
We are 3 people Monday night, didn't we? Request TIF.
That was Henry, is that right?
I think,
Andy Forrest.
which if you just go through which three we're talking about then.
Yeah.
It's noted at the bottom of the page too, which are included. So the body shop, the ice cream place.
Okay. Right.
But that's not including anybody new, though.
Yeah.
That's
Right, no,
kind of-
right. But all that is already figured in here, like you said.
So another way to think of this too, in line 4, or actually go down to line 8, is 122,282, right, for the total TIF available in.
And that, he's in the column on the right side, so everyone can see that, column AT.
Yeah,
FY
right, so,
3031.
so if I don't capture that TIF and use that, I can't go back and get it. This is not something that goes back into a reserve account or anything else. It is the year by year availability of us to be able to spend our own tax money. That's the big problem here. We don't understand this, is the tax money that is available year in, year out is captured here to spend in our town with our taxpayers. And, oh, hold on, sorry, we take this money and if my rates are a little off, then correct me please, but $1 of taxes, a third goes to the school, a third to the city, and a third to the county, is that fair?
It's more weighted toward the school.
Okay,
But
so
more.
not much, okay, so when I take that $1 of TIF, I'm already getting 1/3 of it, but now I'm getting 2/3, I'm getting the other 2/3, okay? So I'm taking the county's money and spending it in our town because we have these improvements necessary.
And you
And,
feel it's the right thing to do.
so I'm trying to explain this, and so in the school situation, we take their money, but the state backfills that, or makes that amount up to what percent, 90?
They make up the school uniform levy, that's $5.40, which is only about roughly a third of the school's levy. So the school's not kept whole. And another legislative proposal, I think, had that backfill on school funding going to zero.
But what is
So
it
you would
today?
lose that from your TIP levy.
But I mean, the state backfills the schools portion that we collect in TIF, correct?
Presently, I'll repeat, there was a legislative proposal this year that almost passed that had that being ripped out. And the school wouldn't get reimbursed.
So that dollar is then spent in our city limits today. All of our tax dollars stay here. That's what Bob and Dick Cook's dad helped establish, Ash helped establish. There's no conspiracy to this. That is the benefit. That's your $2 million savings. You're choosing to spend that money in your own town. We're a town split between 2 counties. And so we don't get a lot of love. I mean, just frankly, and it changes. Adair's been very good to the city. Guthrie's been more difficult on fixing this road, even though we don't get any money out of it. So that's all I'm getting at is it's not a conspiracy. That's where the money's made up of. And there's been a lot of legislative proposals going after TIF that have not passed. And so, I
And
mean,
there's also been a lot that have passed.
but has that involved any default on any bonds to the level that they haven't grandfathered them in?
There's not been a default.
Right. So all I'm getting at is
So I guess that
on a
would,
year-to-year basis, maybe, and I don't know if anybody's even interested in this, I guess, so maybe we should establish that, but if there's some way to share funds to save the taxpayers that money, that's where I'm at. That's the only purpose for me right here. And if that's reviewed year to year, I mean, I don't know, that's all I'm trying to get at. But
How's the board feel about TIF?
Well, I can understand where you're coming from, John, because we are a separate entity and we should stay in control of what we do. And that's kind of what John was trying to say. And I really believe that's the way I'd rather have it. I believe that the city has many things that they need to take care of and they need that money. Otherwise, it wouldn't show that. And I agree that it should be shared between, but that's not the way it's set up.
And Mike, if people come into a utility board meeting and complain to me about high water rates, I'm ready to take that hit. And you can march them in here, because it's happened before. It's happened to me before.
and that's fine. I guess I look at that, it's like, hey, come up and complain, big deal. That's the kind of attitude I hear, and
We're here every month.
I just don't get that kind of thinking, but that's fine, I mean, all we can do is offer and say, hey, we'd like to help, and that's up to you guys. And
we talk about the expenses that the utilities gives the city side. Pat, you mentioned, to me, this is a way to even that because we save $80,000 a year in our water fund. So we do share services, but, gives us a way to recoup some of those funds in that water fund. And, you know, the other side of this is, if we want to do a water treatment plant, and that's $8 to $10 million according to the engineer, can we afford that? If we don't use TIF, and we don't consider these things.
Your water rates would, over a period of time,
So
or the
we're,
water rates would need to be looked at really hard.
that's what I'm trying to get at. We're obligating the water fund in a very large way to do something at the same level is, I don't,
You've also got to, so you're, all right. If you look at, and I'll just talk about one number on this page. If you go to page 13 of 16 and look at what you're, start to think about, and then look at after 2021, row 26, please. So that's your water purchase cost is Xenia. I know everyone is very frustrated with Xenia and it's on Waterworks, what they're doing in terms of passing water cost onto Stuart. Their whole water cost to Xenia is $329,156 for FY 2021. Think about that per year versus if you have a plant that costs $8 million, what your debt service costs are gonna be per year, at least 2 additional staff people, the low cost for treatment locally. I know, so 10% of an increase was 9% recently. 10% on 330,000, 33,000. It's gonna be hard to make up that 8 million for a water plant.
And that's not guaranteeing that we're gonna get better water.
Absolutely. What would the water line cost to get to your water source too? What is your water source? It's a hard question to think about, and
We know how good that is.
The old deep well.
My deal on it is, nothing against city council, you know, I think it's too dangerous with, like you're saying. I think maybe we should this year just go with us and then maybe next year start looking at it again and see. So we can get more information and, you know, cause you guys are probably I know you guys have got a lot of things coming up. Or your whole, you know, a few, yeah. That's my intake on it.
Well, it can't happen without the utility board agreeing on it.
So I'll make a motion that, at least for the present time, we finish our water project with the financing that Chip put together for us and take TIF off the table. That's my motion.
Can you add maybe checking the tip again next year
Sure.
in that?
can't we do that now? We can see what's available now, right?
I think you've got the answer for what's available now.
That's what I mean.
So
I mean, it's really,
I'll be frank with you folks. You guys have to make a policy decision. The numbers are here, make a policy decision. So
I made a motion, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Then moved and seconded. How do you vote? I vote aye. Shirley?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
Brian?
no.
We're done with this, okay.
City council guys, gals, thank you very much for entertaining and looking and taking a night away on a special meeting.
Can I, not to counter what you just approved, and this is because the urban renewal has to be the city council, please be thinking about whether the city council is open to including some water project in your urban renewal plan. That is an initial step that the council is familiar with that you have to do if you do want to revisit the question at some point.
Okay, we are in the process now of doing amendment to our urban renewal plan. I'm talking to the utility board. What Chip is trying to say is, it might be a good idea, we can include it in that process, so we don't have to revisit it again.
It saves you legal costs.
Yeah, and that losses is not gonna cost the utility, and say, might save the city from having to redo it again. Would the board will be okay with that? We just included in our amendment.
I think there's just a vote against, I think that's the council's request, but I think the utility board just told the council they don't want to use TIF. So I don't know why that's just me, but.
Okay, just leave it as it is, and maybe we'll reconsider it next time.
Okay, we'll move on to public forum. Anybody got anything? Council, utility?